Curious is Better podcast. I'm Craig Lamb with Invative, and today we have a great one. Neely Loring is joining, and he's now with Levada CMAC. But I'm going to jump right in, Neely, if that's cool with you, because you and I have spoken before, and you have a great story. Because you started with bootstrapping at MSP, and then you got into logistics and supply chain, and I'd love to hear about that journey and some lessons that kind of came along the way.
Yeah, I mean, it was really fun. I hung a shingle out at 27. I figured I better do it now while I have nobody to be responsible for, which is not the case today. But the whole concept was, an IT takeout in the beginning, a la carte, sure, so help desk, mobility. We got into desktop as a service at data centers across the country. A lot of fun at hair when I started. And I think desktop as a service is the reason I'm as bald as you see me today. But it was a great run, right? So 21 years. We actually sold in 21, and that was great. And I helped the transition. We mostly did it through the indirect channel, which I think we'll get to in a few minutes, which was a great go to market. But the kind of the building of the systems back when Citrix was cool, right? I mean, we had to fix printers every day and all kinds of stuff. So really went through the trenches when people were just figuring out how to spell IP, right?
Uh-huh.
And that was fun. So after Matrix was the name of the company that I started in Columbia, South Carolina. I live in Charleston now. We sold that. About 6 months of having nothing to do made me a little bit crazy. And my wife was like, you need to go figure out something to do. And a buddy of mine started a company back in 96, CMAC, out of Atlanta. And I called him and we talked about it. And he said, I need a managed services division. Can you come build it? Because I think that's the whole key to this industry, right? It's what is the monthly recurring? How do we build an annuity? And I think technology is the commodity because it changes so fast that what we really are here to do is have a personal relationship, surrounded by technology. I tell people all the time, whatever the business, what's the business projection and how do we fold technology around it? Because sometimes a pen and a piece of paper is the right answer.
For sure.
Don't have a line card and say, these are the things that I have to sell. I call it the shut up and listen principle. And that is, if you will ask the right questions to potential customers or existing customers, really, they'll tell you everything that they're wanting to do from a business perspective. It's not a technology sale. It's a relationship sale. And so now logistics. So for us, I call it supply chain as a service. And so think manufacturing, warehousing, 3PL, healthcare, and retail. And that's kind of really the focus. But then how do you kind of flip that to where a business destination has a recurring service, has a recurring income, maybe is even a better way to say that.
This brings up a point too. When you and I have spoken before, you made a comment, something like, with companies like 80% of companies are this, or 80% of what they do or operationally might be the same, but 20% is like that different piece, that differentiator. And you were talking about how like your focus is on accommodating those. So it sounds like that's the process too. So you're listening so you can see what that differentiator is and then support that, right? Figure out how to use technology around that.
Use that for years because I've found it to be true. We're solving for the same business problems or challenges, regardless of the industry. Everybody's got a finance group, everybody's got a marketing group, everybody's got all these different divisions. And then it's, so the 80% is that's the company. That's how you build it. Everybody reads P&L and cash flow statements, balance sheets, all that. It's the 20% that makes them unique and successful. And that's the part that you apply the shut up and listen, because how are they different? It really gets into consultative selling, which is different than I have a printer to sell you or, a scan gun, in the logistics world or a forklift or whatever. What you really focus on is how do you build a relationship around the business destination? And, future proof is a destination like infinity and beyond, but you try and help people go there. And I think the real key is to participate in that at the business level and just, figure out how you fold technology around that.
Yeah, but when you're shutting up and listening though, is there anything that you're listening for in particular? Like are there tells or are there tales or are there, like just affects in their voice of woe that you can pick up on kind of repeatedly to figure out where those soft spots on their head is?
Absolutely. It's a lot of it is about process. And the questions that I tend to ask is, tell me how you do this process. And then, how do you figure out how to improve that process, how to change it, how to shorten it? And then if technology is required, great. One of the things, and I don't, know if you subscribe to EOS, but that's one of the business models that I really like, the entrepreneurial operating system. And it talks about you can have the right person, you can have the right chair, but if you don't have the right person in the right chair, then, figuring out how you get that job done, because really what we're talking about is a relationship. And we've got AI coming in. I'm not even sure what my 17-year-old's going to do for his first job, because it might be replaced. It might not be. But to figure out how the people relationship works and how to ask the right questions and to build trust. And then after you build that trust, you kind of wrap around a solution. In the logistics world, it could be, hey, we want to change the way that you do stuff in your racks, right? So if I pick one thing 100 times a day, I want that in the front. If I pick it one time a week, I want it in the back. How many times do I have to touch something? Those are the kind of questions that you ask that really move the needle, is to think from a business perspective, not from this is what I've got to sell and this is what I'm going to sell you hard. You may not even get something from the deal, but your Rolodex is probably more important than your line card.
Yeah. Well, I'm still curious about, because you and I talked about this for a while, actually, last week, is that we were talking about just even conveying ideas and trying to get people to move from what they're doing. I think it was, you had said reactive to proactive. You're like, just even changing their pace or the way that they're thinking. And you used a real basic example, right? If you're picking something 100 times, move it to the front, that might be like, oh yeah, okay, that's overt, that's obvious. And I know you picked that example for that illustration. But there's some that could tap into like where people feel like job ownership, or that's my value when it's something that could be automated or augmented by technology, or it's not being done as efficiently as possible. So like, how do you start having those conversations, and what are you listening for there? And when you're thinking about, implementing either technology or, like you said, it might be paper and pen, but just done in a better way.
Yeah, the interesting thing is to actually talk to the frontline people. That's what I do, is the people that do the job. I mean, you've got Mahogany Row, right? And the business owners, whatever it is, they have one perspective, but to go and just spend time and just sit there and watch and ask questions, from the people that are making an hourly wage and saying, how does this work? What actually pisses you off about your job? How do you make it better? How could it be better? Those are really important questions to just take the time to do it. And technology may solve that. Oftentimes, I think it does. How do you support the person that's doing it? And, I'm sorry to say it, but sometimes that means you automate that, and that job no longer exists. And we all talk about, oh, we can repurpose somebody. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But at the end of the day, you're there for the business objectives, and to use the best people to have the best margin, and how they manage all of that. And I think that hit on what you were asking.
Well, it totally did. I mean, because there's a lot to unpack, and it's really about too is like, getting to the root of we'll call it the weed, to be metaphoric, right? Is like get to the roots of the weed before you even figure out how to remediate or fix, right?
Sure.
Ask a bunch of questions of where it's happening. I think it's interesting. You know, one of the things that we talked about before too, that I was interested in on your take, because, we do innovative build stuff, right? And so we're always on that when someone makes a decision to build, we're hope that we're considered for stuff like that. But in